Well, it looks like somebody gave a monkey a makeover. Here's a look at the McFarlane Toys Spawn Cygor Patina Edition McFarlane Store 2023 exclusive. Michael Kinski was Al Simmons' friend and squad mate. When he discovered the truth of Al's murder, he attempted to blow the whistle on Jason Wynn. However, he was stopped and subjected to Project Sim, the simian experiments of Frederick Wilhelm, and became the beast known as Cygor, short for cybernetic gorilla. Cygor is featured with a patina paint in an exclusive designer box. Genetically modified, organically oxidized. Before, of course, we get a closer look at the McFarlane Toys Patina edition of Cygor, let me send a big thank you first to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample we could have a look at. This version of Cygor is a 2023 McFarlane Toys store exclusive and is limited to only 3,050 pieces. The figure, though, of Cygor, at least in the stance that I have him right now, is about 8 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 20 centimeters tall. Sliding now over this version of Cygor and bringing the original Cygor that we've already looked at here on this channel, you can see that they are using, of course, the exact same mold, but colored, though, very differently. The newer one that we are looking at that is the McFarlane Store exclusive is actually the Patina edition, which is basically like the naturally green and brown film that starts to develop on bronze and similar materials. So you can see like a lot of the cool greens start to develop here on the otherwise gold nature of Cygor. But other than that, yeah, they're just using the same bodies. Then parting ways with the primates, making a space though in the middle. Let's bring in at least a Spawn. This just happens to be a Spawn that came packed along with Batman, but it gives you at least an idea of how big and bulky Cygor stands. Now, because he's already big, Cygor doesn't come with much in the way of stuff. The figure, first of all, comes included with a display stand, although a little laughable the fact that they decide to give him a stand so small. I mean, yes, it does attach to either one of his large feet, but I feel like they should have probably given him like the mega size stands instead. It's though cast here in gold plastic this time around instead of the traditional black plastic. And of course, you've also got the Spawn logo printed across the front, although stretched a little wider to accommodate the space of the circle. Again, you can take it really for all intents and purposes. Either one of Cygor's feet will accommodate the peg. But again, like with it only being about the same size as Cygor's feet anyways, it doesn't really make much sense that they decide to use this stand. Also, for me at least, when it comes to displaying the figure, I always usually like to have Cygor displayed with his larger hands down in front and sort of lunging forward. Now, you could have the figure really standing upright if you wanted to, but it's going to cause a little off-kiltering when it comes to the figure standing properly. Now, the figure also, speaking of stands, comes also included with a stand to store at least his trading card. The trading card actually does have Patina edition off to the far side, off to the left side. And we've got Cygor there printed down below, although in a very small to almost unable to read print. Cygor actually is in a pose where it looks like he's swinging his arms. Not something, again, that can be easily pulled off. I guess that's maybe one of the reasons why they gave him a display stand, just to give him a little bit of extra stability. Again, on the back of it, you got a certificate of authenticity, indicating that this is certifying this is a limited edition worldwide product. The Cygor figurine is authentic and officially licensed by McFarlane Toys. The figurine was created, developed, and designed by Todd McFarlane and his award-winning design team. Out of the limited run of 3,050, this one happens to be I think that's P19. For a second, it looked like P19, but I mean, P19 would still be 19. I thought it said PI9. That's what I was thinking initially, but it's P19 out of 3,050. I'm going to move this off to the side. Again, when it comes to displaying these figures, I always usually like to use the standees because, of course, having the card next to the figures always, I think, it kind of just adds a little bit more shelf appeal to the figures. Now, picking up those Cygor, he is heavy, but if you already have this figure, you probably already know that there's a few hollow elements to him, obviously, like his torso, for example. Knock, knock, who's there? This is kind of more just a hollow cavity. And inside, of course, it's not a solid plastic. Solid, of course, for the arms. Solid for the head, but like the body itself for Cygor, that's probably one of the reasons why he isn't maybe as heavy as you might think he is. Head sculpt-wise, though, it's using the same Cygors from before. The thing about the original Cygor is we're going to bring him in for a second. Cygor relied really on a lot of grays and a lot of blues to bring the detail home. Whereas actually the newer one that we get here in the Patina edition gives us kind of more of a traditional coloring for what you would expect like a gorilla to be, really like black mostly here for the coloring. Some nice little brown accents added in there as well. And while he does have a red eye on this side, he has now a green eye. As the original Cygor that we had a look at shared actually 2 red eyes. One in the smaller side and then one more for the cybernetic side. I do kind of like the idea that they changed the color scheme a little bit by offering up green this time around instead of the red. The mouth is in a permanent opening position. There's really no way to actually close the mouth, but it's a really nicely sculpted face. In a way, I know the other one is kind of more the traditional colors I think of, at least for Cygor, but I kind of like the colors of the darker brown a little bit more on the newer Cygor release. Now, of course, one thing that also is very much different between the two is while this one had more silver armor with little gold tubes, for example, and little knobs and dials on the sides, this new Cygor, for example, relying, of course, on the color scheme of Patina, sticks to kind of more the colors of gold and bronze. Within that gold and bronze, though, is the natural oxidization of green that would develop. So you got a little bit of areas, little patches, for example, that have the eroded away or oxidized sections there of the green, and you got a little bit like darker browns added in there as well. The browns aren't as easy to make out because really you're dealing with so much bronze across the front of it and back of the body anyways. But the greens are really the one thing, the star of the show, that really popped the most on this figure. You see it all across his arms, for example, up the sides of his bicep and triceps, and all across the shoulders there as well. The thing only about it, though, is while the other Cygor could say, if anything, he benefited from having a different color scheme. So, like, for example, while really relying on kind of the darker blacks and darker grays, the silver really was something that popped a little bit easier. I find the gold does blend a little bit more, though, to the brown, but I gotta say, like, the brown is a really nice touch, and really is a different approach for Cygor that works really well with this particular figure. With also being something that they're using the darker black for, it gives us more of a chance to kind of see the stitching and the war wounds that he has there on the front of his body. All the experimentation that they did on this poor guy's body, you can really see it drive home a lot easier on this mold than maybe on the Cygor we looked at from before. Of course, when we spin around the back of the figure's body, you have quite the very large gorilla behind. He does have some posability, of course. Obviously, all these newer McFarlane releases are going to have a lot more posability than maybe perhaps the original Cygor that we got way back, in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I am really liking the look of this guy quite a lot. Now, his articulation is going to be the exact same as the other Cygor that we looked at before. So, getting down to his head, first of all, his head's going to be on a ball joint. It moves back and forth. It does move up and down as well. But you can see, like, even though really he does have this collar piece that goes all around the head, it doesn't in any really way limit the articulation when it comes to the figure. Though while moving it around, obviously this is all hard plastic, but does moving though, you can kind of hear the more hollow nature of his body. But really love the head sculpt though. This is a fantastic way to take the existing mold I already liked from before and just changing the elements of the color schemes altogether. It's more, again, cosmetic changes than anything else. But boy, does it ever make for a nice looking Cygor. Now for, of course, his arms do rotate, but the problem with this side, for the obvious way, is the fact that he does have the shoulder pad. This softer plastic does get in the way, though, when it comes to moving his arms. So, like, both arms really move out to about 45 degrees or so. This arm more has the freedom to kind of rotate all the way around. This arm is going to be a little bit more limited just because, again, he's got the shoulder pad in place. So when you are rotating, it clearly is a place where you can't really move the arm any further than what it is right now. Again, you can move it out, but you can only move it out to about 90 degrees or about 45 degrees. So he is a little bit more limited when it comes to his arm articulation. Now, he also does have hinges in his elbows. I noticed with this particular figure, actually really the other Cygor that we also looked at earlier, did also have really tight joints in the elbows. The elbow hinge, at least, if I can get the arm straight here, so it's almost like cracking open a lobster tail, but you're just going to bend it, and the hinge only really gives you about a 45-degree angle bend. If not for that, you can, of course, bring the arms out also as well. There looked almost like there could be a swivel here in this form, but there's nothing that you can actually turn on the figure's arm. The hands, of course, do rotate all the way around. He's always going to have really a pose with his hands where he looks like he's dragging his knuckles. Nicely sculpted hands for what they are. But again, he's not going to be in a grabbing pose, for example, like if you want to have his arms up, for example. You can do that, but he's always going to kind of really look like he should be dragging, or like holding someone's spare change. Like, again, you can have the arms kind of, the hand rotated around that way, for example. The upper torso, or I should say really his entire torso, because there's no cut right here. You can't independently swivel this at all. But he does have an upper torso ball joint. The problem really with Cygor is also the fact, if I just get his arm out of the way here, is that this lower half is all of really soft plastic. The original Cygor had this. This one also has sort of the same problem, that because it's so soft, it does leave naturally a gap in between. So you always really kind of want to make sure, if you are posing this guy, for example, where he is bringing his arms up, for example, and you want to kind of have his body just arched a little bit, it's going to notice a very obvious gap right here, giving us sort of the coined term, figure diaper. Again, it's just the fact that they are using the softer plastic. I do wish in a way that they could be a little bit more conformed, but honestly, really, when it comes to bringing the figure, at least putting him in a display pose, I'm going to have him more kind of arched forward than having him upright. Then for his legs are going to be quite smaller. His legs do go forward and back. There is also a hinge, but again, like as you're moving the leg, you can kind of really see like how this lower half of his body just really starts to fall apart on him. I mean, it conceals the joint. That's its job after all. But unfortunately, like any bit of movement past really what the desired look is for Cygor, you're going to notice like a few little opened areas like this, little sections where you can really basically look inside and see exactly how the figure's built. The figure, though, leg does move forward and back. He does have a hinge in his knee, only just a single hinge. And then he also has, if I can get down to his feet, he also has ankle pivots back and forth as well. Again, like this is a figure where, like the original Cygor, sure, yes, you probably could have him upright like this. But then the problem with it, though, is you're going to want to just make sure. You're going to really want to make sure that his body is sort of more attached together. Honestly, it works really much better if you have the figure kind of lean forward like this. The moment you have him sort of more in an upright pose, you can kind of notice there's a lot more gaps, there's a lot more spaces, and it doesn't maybe look as, and it doesn't really hold the weight of the figure all that well either. That's probably one of the reasons also as well they included the display stand as they did. So you can attach it, of course, to the bottoms of the feet of Cygor. We'll just attach obviously only to the one side. Get it in place there. Yeah, it's a good-looking figure. I don't really ever display my Cygor upright like this. Just because, again, like, if he had double hinges in his elbows, which the original Cygor never really had either, then you could probably have him in a pose, like, for example, where he's pounding his chest. You can't quite pull that off, just because, again, like, the way the hinges are designed on his elbows, for example, even if you were to bring them forward, like, this arm is really super tight. This one actually on this side is a little easier to bend, but even then, I can't get it in a pose where it looks like he's naturally pounding away his chest. So for me, I'm probably going to be displaying Cygor as I am displaying normally Cygor, with his arms forward, bringing his hands around, of course, like that, bringing his body around as well, and having him displayed like this. I may have to, of course, do a little bit of moving things around now, of course, that the lower half of his body is leaving a big gap space. But again, like bringing the original Cygor, I think there's also as well another Cygor that McFarlane Toys did release. I think it came also included with She's Spawn. So we are going to be looking at her in an upcoming, or that 2-pack in an upcoming review. The thing I also really like about this is, yeah, it is really just cosmetic changes. They have essentially taken the exact same body of the Cygor that we got from before and finding a different way to cosmetically present it. I do actually really like the darker colors of his body. In a way, I kind of wish that they could have used this darker brown for the coloring more for Cygor. I know Cygor initially usually starts at being more of a dark gray or borderlining black. This figure does have a little more of a sheen to his plastic. You can probably even see. This one actually is painted a little bit better, so it doesn't have as much the shine on the plastic. I think like the original OG Cygor is one still that I love, but I really like the approach and the color scheme on this one. Even if you don't really necessarily like the bronze and the additional green that they oxidized onto the actual plastic, I think the color scheme on his face is considerably better than the first Cygor that we got from McFarlane's team. Swinging now over to the final looks, and Cygor in the rotisserie, you've got the figure displayed right now in his standing position. It is possible, and I guess that's one reason why they included a display stand. Still puzzling the fact that they decided to use a smaller regular stand instead of just a mega-sized figure stands, because of course I think if you're dealing with a bigger figure like this, like Cygor, he really does accommodate a much bigger stand. Kind of that skit from SCTV. The bigger man gets the bigger pork chop. The bigger figure, I feel, also should get the bigger display stand. But the stand still does its job. I mean, it allows at least the figure to have some stability while he's swinging his arms. Unfortunately, though, with only having single hinges at his disposal, it means that you can't quite bring his arms close enough to his chest to give him a successful pounding of his chest. But you get him in somewhat of a mid-swing, and the figure does look good upright, even though I really prefer to have him dragging his knuckles instead. The one thing I really like about this guy is the cosmetic changes that they implemented. Yes, while it's not being traditional OG Cygor colors, the silver's been done away with altogether in favor of a bronze. But I gotta tell you, like, the bronze works really well with the green. It doesn't have any other colors, so that's one thing, unfortunately, with the Patina edition. Maybe the original Cygor had a few extra additional colors that they've added to the actual armor. This version of Cygor obviously only just has just the bronze and just has the green. But also, like, the green does work well for being Patina. Patina, after all, is the oxidation of bronze. It really does look like, even though it's made of plastic, that the metal on his armor has oxidized. The takeaway that I have from this figure is the color scheme that they added to his body. Not to the armor, but the regular monkey body underneath. I feel in a way that this is a superior paint job than what we got with the original Cygor. My thing I still don't like about the original release that we got from McFarlane's team was the fact that the plastic seemed very shiny. When I brought the figure in at the end, just before we jumped over to the turntable, I did say that the original Cygor had kind of more of a shinier plastic, and still stays true. I mean, the newer one that we get here not only is painted better for the head sculpt and the what monkey body at least we get, but also it isn't as shiny, so it isn't as much of a detractor as what the original Cygor was. I really like the way that this one turned out. Not a traditional Cygor at all, but still I feel a really interesting Cygor if you are a big fan of the character. What do you guys think of the Patina edition Cygor? Have you had the chance to pick up this one for yourself? Again, this is a McFarlane site store exclusive. It's limited, I believe, to only 3,500 pieces, or is it 30? No, it wasn't 3,500. It's 3,050 pieces. Again, have you had the chance to pick this one up for yourself? Let me know down below. And also, like I said, that there is going to be another release of this guy. There's a Cygor that got packed along with She Spawn. We will be, of course, looking at that 2-pack in an upcoming review. The key to making sure that you're not missing out on anything at all that the person behind the camera is posting up is making sure, of course, first of all, if you enjoyed this video, shamelessly plugging the idea that if you like the video, want to hit with a like, but more importantly, if you did want to stick around for more Spawn reviews and other things from McFarlane's team, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.